Hello, hello. Welcome to Healthy Perspectives, a podcast that takes on current cultural and social issues through a clinical lens. Hello, hello. All right, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, we appreciate your time. And without further ado, the tip of the day for you today is when things no longer serve their intended purpose, we must explore their usefulness. It's not optional. Folks, a lot of great things turn bad. That is just a fact of life. And if you're not in a place where you can see that, you probably want to turn this particular episode off, because the reality in our current culture is a lot of things have turned bad. I thought about incorporating a whole bunch of stuff, doing some stuff about, the Social Security benefits or whatnot. But today I decided, nope, we're going to hit education. What is education? What has it become? These are very important questions. So going back a little bit in history, I decided I'd take a look at what is the original design of education. And I tracked it back, at least here in the United States. In 1830, Horace Mann originally started this whole premise of free education. Let's get the population educated. The whole purpose originally was because they wanted to make the citizenry smarter. They figured that the smarter the citizens of the United States, the better off the United States would be on a global and local scale. It just would be better, which is true. I mean, that premise is still real and valid. And so they broke it down into a few different categories. One, they said it was going to be tax funded and universally accessible. Now, in 1830, universally accessible, it took a different tone. And there were some early flaws, not just in education, but in our culture. We had slavery. It was, women and men's rights issues. Like, there was a lot of stuff that wasn't right. But the premise was still solid. In the event that women and men's rights were, more appropriate, that racism was eradicated, these premises still hold true. And there are four categories: literacy. Well, technically three, I would say, because one of them is kind of a combined category. But literacy, make the population smarter, right? Literacy. That's reading, writing, arithmetic, your basic, fundamental pieces. Civic virtue, which is we want to make voters that are intelligent enough to read the voter card, understand those dynamics, those relational dynamics, and thought of the common good, meaning it's not all about you. The third is kind of a combined piece. It's got productive citizenship and workforce development. They go hand in hand, okay? Productive citizenship and workforce development. Now, with this backdrop, I want to introduce to you some of the problems. And for those of you who are following along on Rumble or YouTube, you're going to get to see this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share this with you. You're going to get to see it firsthand as I go. So it's kind of a beautiful opportunity for those of you who have not gotten onto Rumble or YouTube to find your way there and join the discussion so you can actually see this content. So I started with the premise of, what do we do with the idea that this is a huge tax burden? Okay. And it brought me to ask this question: how much are we spending at the Department of Education? And I came to this education data initiative. Okay. It says We are spending annually $857.2 billion with a B billion dollars. Oh, okay, that's $17,000 per kid. It's $17,000 per kid. I did some basic math, folks. This isn't that hard. Basic math, $17,000 per kid. If I were a really good teacher, let's say, and I were going to teach all the different subjects to a single kid, I could collect $17,000 and give them an education. How many students would I need to have in a class to make a really good living? Five. Think about that. That's 85 grand. 5 kids in a class. And I'm going to make a really good living, folks. 5. How many kids are in your kids' class if you've got children? 20? 25? 30? Sometimes more. 5. Now you're like, but it's subject driven. It's still a ridiculous amount of overhead. Ridiculous amount of overhead. Well, they have to heat the building. They have to have the structure. They have to pay what. Okay, I get it. But are you telling me it's that much overhead? I think you would be wrong. So the next thing that I decided to do was to look at, okay, what, again, for those of you following along, what then is the overhead? And I started with something really basic, the employees. Look, I've run a business, and you know that about 50% of total revenue goes to overhead with employee costs if you're running a business. Max. Okay. And that means that the employment cost is going to be really big. And so I come in here and I go, okay, for those of you following along, went to a new website. This is about the U.S. Department of Education. And right there, at the very, very beginning of it, 4,400 employees with a $68 billion budget. I'm like, okay. How much of that federal budget goes to employee costs? So I looked it up. $68 billion budget, of which $682.9 million goes to the employees. So I did some basic math and I said, oh my gosh, that's $155,000 per employee, which means at the federal level, where they're not actually doing the education, we're spending $155,000 per employee. Most of those employees are probably not making $155,000. So what does that mean? That means there are some very overpaid employees at the Department of Education, which is fine. I understand it. Like, dude, I do not blame the employees at all. Take what you can get, right? Problem is, that's our tax dollars, which means there's this huge tax burden. Some of that is definitely being wasted. Okay. Now I'm not here to bash the Department of Education. Like, let me back up a tiny bit, folks. This is important. I want you to understand this about me. Something really important about me you ought to know. Education changed my family's trajectory big time. My parents didn't go get an education until my dad did eventually later in life. But early on, nope. I came from a family that didn't really believe in the higher education system. And I personally did get an education, and I have reaped the rewards of putting in that academic work. So I'm not against education whatsoever. Not against it. Do I think it has limitations? Yes, I do. Do I think that some things do not require higher education? Yes, I do. And not everybody needs to go get a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD or a doctoral degree of any kind. It's just not, it's just not necessary. For a lot of people, it's unnecessary. Okay. Little caveat there, but I wanted to make sure I gave you that information so that you know I'm not anti-education, but I am against waste. I don't like to waste things. I like to be responsible for what we have and with what we have. So, next question I came up with after addressing the 4,400 employees, $155,000 per or thereabouts was, okay, let's go down the three-step design. So starting with literacy, I'm like, okay, if we're going to pay a crud ton of money, literacy should be pretty high, right? So I go to the NAEP, National Assessment of Educational Progress, and I go, okay, let's take a look at this. And I scroll down and I quickly learn. Actually, I come down here. Give me a second. I must have misplaced that one. Interesting. Well, I looked at the two places. One, the highest level of expenditure was New York, $30,000 per student. The lowest level was Idaho, 9,000 and something per student per year annually. And so I went to the NAEP and I started going, okay, well, let's just do a straight across comparison. Let's just compare them straight across. What does it look like if we do that? I'm moving a little gadget here. If we're looking at New York, we're looking at success rates in mathematics. And in 2024, they had a 271. Now, if you notice from the little chart down here, that's not super great. You know, back in around 2000, we were in the same spot. You would think with those kinds of expenditures that would go up, that we would have better results, but we don't. So then I looked at the reading scores and I went, okay, those are dropping as those expenditures are really high in New York. And I'm like, I wonder how that would compare to a place that spends one third the amount, which was Idaho. And I went, math scores, 278. Wait a second. Take a look. 271 for New York, 278. Less money, better production. How does that happen? That doesn't make sense. Does that make sense to you folks? I hope you're going no, but based on what I've learned about your math abilities, folks, let me detail it out for you because maybe you don't understand this. 278 versus 271 in 2024. Which one is higher? The 278. That means that Idaho outperforms, is better at math than the average New York students. Okay. What about reading? New York is at a 257. Idaho, a 261. They spend one third of the amount. That's like a 66% savings. That would be like the equivalent of me saying, I am going to give you $1,000 in Idaho, or I'll give you $3,000 in New York. That's a lot more money in New York. But that $3,000 is buying more poop. It's garbage. That doesn't make any sense because the 261 in Idaho is greater than the 257 in New York. You're spending more in New York and you're getting less. You're spending less in Idaho and getting more. Okay. Why did I go through all of that? I wanted to point out to you The one thing that you must know, literacy clearly is not dependent on how much we're spending, which means it's something else. Something else is a big factor. Now, again, those were just the highest and the lowest in the country. New York was the highest expenditure at 30,000 plus per student every year. And Idaho was the least at $9,000 plus, less than $10,000 per student, and better outcomes, which means it's broken. It's broken. The literacy part of the Department of Education is broken. Doesn't function correctly. Period. Okay. So let's jump to the civic virtue, the common good, which, if we start from the basics that are easy to tell, let's start with the politics, folks. Are the Democrats and Republicans getting along to benefit us? If they are, we have common good, civic virtue. Do the Democrats and Republicans get along? They do not. Matter of fact, there's more political hate today, I would suggest, than maybe ever. So what does that mean? The common good is not being understood. Otherwise, the Democrats and Republicans would work together for us, you and me. Okay. That proves that on the big scale, it's broken. But let's take a look at a little bit more detail. Let's think of common good. Common good, one of the things that I thought about when I thought of common good would be crime rates. That seems pretty simple. People who care about people are not going to commit crimes, right? So to stay true to form, I went ahead and I looked at Idaho's and I looked at New York's. For those of you who follow along, you're going to see, whoa, spike from 2021. There was a huge spike in New York. Huge, like huge spike. So they get more money, they spend more money, and they have more crime. Worse education, more crime. Idaho, less crime, massively less. All right. Now we're looking at the numbers, the numbers that we should be looking at here. Now this is to 2018, just because that's where the macro trends went. But like, even if you went to 2018 and you'd be talking about a lot more crime in New York still. You can look at these maps, these little charts. In 2018, it was down 3%, but that was still, what is that? 11,000 per 100,000. And so, like, whoa, way less in Idaho. Okay. So crime is up. What about jail? Jail in New York, again, thinking civic virtue, right? 317 people incarcerated per 100,000 residents. Jail in Idaho, 460 per 100,000. Whoa, way higher. What might that mean, folks? I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities. It means it means maybe it has something to do with the judicial system. And maybe Idaho considers, incarcerating people at lower levels as opposed to waiting until they're extreme. I don't know. It could mean that incarcerations in New York are down. But wait, why would they be so much lower when crime is so much higher? There's got to be a connection there of some sort, I would think. Okay. So I'm like, that didn't really help me paint the picture. So I said, what about productive citizenship? Remember, that's the third and the fourth, productive citizenship and then employment. We're going to get to those, right? And so if you're in jail, you're not a productive citizen. There's a lot of people in Idaho that are in jail. But if they weren't productive citizens, that's probably a good thing. And if maybe that's encouraging productive citizenship. I don't know. I mean, I'm not typically fear-based. Matter of fact, psychologically speaking, I think fear-based is a temporary solution. And so, I'm going to take a look at the employment. And in New York, it's 4.4% unemployment and a 3.8% unemployment in Idaho. Huh. I wonder if that makes up some of that difference. There's lots more questions here than answers, folks. So we have a hard time proving civic virtue, productive citizenship, and workforce development because our statistics around it stink. They just absolutely stink. Okay. For those of you who are following along on Rumble and YouTube, I did not put those data sources up. So those of you who are following along, you're going to get to see this real quick. You got the Idaho, you've got the New York crime rates, then you got the jail by 100,000, the jail by 100,000 in Idaho, and then you've got the unemployment 4.4, unemployment 3.8 in Idaho. I went through those really fast because I talked about them and I had apparently forgot to share it. But all of that being said, there are some things around productive citizenship that I wish we could track. I wish we could track volunteer work. I wish we could track community participation, like how many people attend the local fairs and, the stuff like that. I think those would be really interesting community-based data points, but there's really nobody tracking any of that stuff. Instead, what we do is we track things like DEI and call that our community involvement, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, you've heard me talk about those things in the past. And let me just show you an anecdotal story that came up for me just the other day. I came into Psychology Today. For those of you who know how to find a therapist, this is probably one of the best ways to do it. And I went ahead and I was actually pulling up my own. So you'll see if you're following on Rumble, YouTube, there I am. Okay. But then there's this guy right next to me and it caught my attention. The kink therapist. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, what in the world is that? I'm like, I've been trained in, sex therapies and stuff like that. And I'm like, but this is interesting. PsyD, LMFT. And so I opened it up and I was like, this is what education is buying you folks. Literally says verbatim, you can't stop thinking about it. Just the thought of it turns you on. You're a kinky person. And you picture yourself having all those nasty things done to you. And I'm thinking, oh my Lord, this is education in 2025. I looked it up. He graduated in 2020. 2020. In the last 5 years. Then it says the beads of sweat roll down. Look, folks, this is a disgusting marketing ploy. Disgusting. Everybody I know who has had wrestled with sexual fantasies and challenges around human sexuality, what they actually need is not this garbage. What they actually need, folks, is to understand that human sexuality is both relationship and biology. The physical aspect makes up less than 10% of the challenge. The relational aspect, the relationship, 90%. The physical stuff, y'all can figure it out. You don't need to be told that you're just kinky, whether you are or not. Now, you might be kinky. Do I care? I'm not judging the kinky person. I don't really give a crud how you manage the biology, because if you do it wrong, you pay the price, not me. And if you do it right, you pay the price, not me. The biology is the biology, but the relationship is the priority. And anybody who sees it differently is lying to themselves or to you. But that's what our education system is creating right now. And folks, I got to be honest, I'm a little disgusted with it. I am a little disgusted with it. And frankly, going back to my tip of the day, when things no longer serve their intended purpose, we must explore their usefulness. Frankly, the Department of Education, not sure it's training people correctly. People in my profession, I'm a professional counselor. People in my profession were told, you have to tell people that it's okay to live in their fantasy world. Well, it's not. It's not. It's just not. You can have fantasies. I'm okay with that. No problem with you having a fantasy. But for me to affirm your fantasy, nope, I don't have to do that. If I want to do that, I can. But I don't have to do that. And I personally am not going to contribute to your dysfunction if all you want to do is create some fantasy existence. This is not the Matrix. We don't get to decide everything. Reality exists whether you like it or not. And our education system has gone astray. That's a reality. Now, do I think that everybody needs to be cut? Those 4,400 employees need to be laid off, and we need to, I'm not saying that. Folks, I don't get to decide that part of it. What I can tell you is we collectively need to consider where things have lost their intended purpose and decide collectively for common good what the purpose ought to be and drive in that direction. It should not be a free-for-all. It shouldn't. Education should not be a let's live in your fantasy world and we're putting litter boxes in the schools. Nope. Sorry, common good. We don't tailor our programs for the 2 to 3%. Doesn't mean we don't love you. We can love you. But that is not for the common good. And it never will be. It's just like schools are not tailored for the 2 to 3% who are flippin' amazing students. Like ridiculous, your Doogie Howser MD students. The only way to do that is to accelerate their individual program, meaning move them to a different class, but then they're the youngest in the class, always. Yeah, it's not a perfect system, but we can't tailor it for that particular student because it's not for the common good. It doesn't, it doesn't make sense to focus on the 3% at the ends and lose the 94% that are in the middle. I want to do things to help those that are in the 3%, but specializing everything to facilitate those is not for the common good. What I would say, maybe something like this. Maybe that's where private schools fill in the gaps. And they can have accelerated programming. And they could have reality training. Stuff like that. Folks, when a thing no longer serves its intended purpose, and we take a look at it and we realize it's dysfunctional the way that it is now, we have to collectively Work together. Democrats, Republicans, independents, I don't care who it is politically. We have to also work together. Mothers and fathers talking to each other, friends, communicating, expressing our thoughts and ideas. We can change this culturally. And if we change this culturally, our politics will follow because they come downstream. So what I'd say is talk about it. Don't hate. It's not about hate. I don't hate that we've gotten where we've gotten. I don't. Do I want it to be different than this? I do. I do. Education is important. And it needs to be treated as important. And if they're making $155,000 a year and they're not even training and teaching our kids, what are we doing? Folks, we got to do better than this. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Please like, subscribe, and all of those things. Share this with friends. Get this word out there, and you have a wonderful day. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. We appreciate our audience a lot, so we give you some simple ways to track us down. Please like, subscribe, and follow all the podcasts on different platforms, but you can also email us at healthyperspectives@protonmail.com, or you can check out our website at healthy-perspectives.com/podcast. It's a backward slash. So if you want to go to our landing page, if you go to healthy-perspectives.com, you'll still find us. You just got to click on the podcast button. Thank you so much.